Hello, I'm Dave Friedley. I'm the high school principal at Conestoga Junior Senior High School in Murray, Nebraska. Rhonda and I worked together in a former life when I was up in northeast Nebraska at Omaha Nation Public School for 10 years. And Rhonda and I worked together up there. For some reason, Rhonda seems to think I know something about being a principal. I'll just tell you, I'm a principal who never thought I'd be a principal. And until I saw and understood I could do it the way that I thought fit me, I never wanted this job, but now that I'm in it, it's the best job I could ever have, and I love it. I can't believe they give me a school to run, to be very honest, and by the end of this little session, you'll probably be surprised that they give me a school to run either. Rhonda asked me to just give some discipline and classroom management, if you want to call it that, tips and ideas from a principal's perspective, and there are lots of different perspectives out there. This is mine. My mother always said, if you can tell the difference between good advice and bad advice, you don't need advice. And so if you don't like it, that's fine. I'm just giving you one perspective, and it's good. Maybe it'll spark some discussion. The things I do, typically the things I do always spark discussion with the teachers that I'm in charge of, if you want to call it that. I'll just start out by saying, when it comes to school discipline, behavior management, however you want to term it, I've got some different ways. I think you'll kind of see that. Good teaching prevents managerial episodes. And managerial episodes is simply an old TESA, teacher expectations into student achievement, buzzword from 30 years ago. Managerial episodes simply is management. What are you doing? How are you operating in your classroom? The things you do that keep you away from teaching. McCrell talks about what is discipline, and they said discipline is simply maintaining the educational environment. So any way you want to cut it, that's what you're doing. What you're trying to do is increase the whole idea of teaching more and doing everything else less. That's why you guys got into education to begin with. I always talk about being a principal, and I think in some respects being a teacher is also this balance beam or a teeter-totter of management on one side and leadership on the other. And when you have a lot of management going on, that means your leadership goes down. On the contrary, when you have less management to do, your leadership can go up. And I will tell you, every principal wants to be like this. Every principal wants to be leadership driven, not management driven. I don't care what anybody else says. Here's what they want to be known as. They want to be known as a leader rather than a manager. But it's a time thing. And what you as a teacher, I think, want to do is reduce management and increase leadership. And I've got some little tricks and mind games that I play with that whole deal. We maybe talk about that a little bit as time goes on. The first thing I would say to you is, when you go into a school, understand what your mission statement is of the school. At Conestoga, it is Conestoga inspires and prepares students for life. And so that's my job every day. How do I inspire students? How do I prepare them? And certainly being self-disciplined, certainly having their own self-management is part of that. It's also, how do you inspire students? I view every, however you want to call it, discipline issue, reteaching session, however you want to call that, I classify that as an opportunity to build leadership in young people. And that's a mind game I play. Otherwise, it does become management. I don't want to be a manager. I want to be a leader. I got into this business to coach and to teach, and I tell students that. When I'm struggling with students, I'll look them in the eye and I said, if I wanted to go into law enforcement, if I wanted to go into punishment, I would have gone into law enforcement or criminal justice. I'd be working right now at the state pen, but I didn't. I went into education and into coaching. My job is to teach people. And I just sit down with them and I say, my job right now is to teach you the right way to do this that doesn't bring you into conflict with other people. And so that's what I'm trying to do. When I was at Omaha Nation, our mission statement was, part of it was, in a safe, respectful environment. Well, I've grown around there. I thought about, what does that mean, that whole idea of respect? What does it mean? And I remember back to Larry Meyer, my high school math instructor at Milford High School back in the early 70s. And Mr. Meyer always said, Mathematics is the language of the sciences. If you understand what math is, you can understand the sciences. So I started thinking one day when I became a principal, what's the language of education? What's the language that everybody speaks in education? And it hit me that it is respect. Respect is the language of education. And so I use that, and I tell students that. And so it comes down to respect. How do I teach a respectful environment? How do I teach students to be respectful? How do I teach our staff to be respectful? Roland Barthes said, the nature of the relationships of the adults who inhabit a school have more to do with the character of the school and the achievements of the students than any other factor. And as I think about that, it is, how do adults treat adults in a school? And if you've got backbiting and fighting and cliques and people that belittle each other, kids pick up on that. And all of a sudden what you have in your school are cliques and backbiting and fighting and all those belittling behaviors and bullying that goes on. So for us, respectful environment begins with us. It begins with how we respond to each other and how I respond to teachers. Do I have issues with how teachers? You bet. How do I handle it? I handle it privately. I don't broadcast it. I try to be real up front. I don't pull punches with people. I don't sugarcoat it, but I don't air it out either. That's our private stuff. You know, Don Henley says, dirty laundry. We don't air our dirty laundry out here. So, respect is the language of education. I use that all the time with kids. You can't see it, but it's written up here in my office, right above my head, on a soffit, or in 10-inch letters, is respect is the language of education. I want students to see that when they're talking to me. If they're not looking at me, they're looking at that, and that works, and it works fine. I also use some things I call guiding questions, and over on my wall, and maybe I'll show those in the video at the end here, I don't know. But I've got educational. Now I'll tell you what, I'll put them on a wiki or something, and Rhonda can add it to something and let you guys see it. I have guiding questions for kids, and the first guiding question for a student is, what's your educational goal? And the second one is, how does your behavior, attendance, achievement, and attitude, how is that affecting your progress toward your educational goal? And I will tell you, kids will walk in and say, oh, well, I want to graduate, or I want to go to college, or I want to, and I go, so how does pulling someone's pants down in science, that actually happened, how does that make getting progress towards your educational goal? And especially for the fact that I'm now going to suspend you for 5 days, which I don't like to do, by the way, but I got to send a message on occasion. How's that going to affect your educational goal? Might set you back just a little bit. So I use some things like that. I'm always asking students so that I can get their input and make the things happen with what we're doing with education. I want them to think it through. That's part of the learning process. Along with that goes a great quote by Richard Nixon. A few weeks after he left office in disgrace back in 1974, and he said, "Ourselves we give away by what we say about others." And really, what he was talking about was the media and how he is being dragged through the mud. I'm not going to get into a political discussion with you, but what he was really saying is, the old glass houses thing. Are you throwing stones or what? But what people were saying about him said as much about who they were as what they are. So I'm real careful what I say about students. I'm real careful about how I phrase things. I use the 55 miles an hour on Highway 1, which is right outside of Murray, Nebraska here, and right outside our old school that sits out in the middle of the cornfield. And I say, if you choose to drive 65 every day on Highway 1, I can guarantee you sooner or later you're going to get pulled over by the State Patrol or by Cass County. Now, when you get pulled over, you're going to think two things. One, you were either unlucky because everybody else was speeding that day and you just happened to be the person that got caught, or you're stupid. And stupid is, as stupid does, as Forrest Gump said, if you drive down the road at 65 all the time, eventually your time's going to come. Now, I'll never tell kids they're stupid, and usually they will say, I'll say, well, everybody else is doing it, I'm the only one that got caught. And I'll just say, give them the analogy, speeding down Highway 1. And then I'll say, so today, were you unlucky? Or and they'll say, oh, I was unlucky, because no student's going to say they're stupid. But it goes back to, what do you say about each other? I never tell kids they're stupid when they've done something. I say, well, today you were unlucky, you got caught. And that gives them an out, and I don't back them in the corner when it comes to that. And hopefully they learn from something. Another thing I tell students all the time is, discipline yourself so somebody else doesn't have to. I don't like this job. I told you, I worked it, so it's not management, it's not punishment to me. I don't particularly like discipline. I'd rather do other things, but I'll teach and I'll reteach. And I just tell students, if you're self-disciplined enough, you'll never make it into my office. You'll come into my office and say, Mr. Friedley, would you write me a letter of recommendation for a scholarship? And I'll be happy to do that. And that may be the only time you make it into my office. That'll be okay with me. I got other things I need to do too. You know, discipline, everybody knows where it comes from. It comes from the word disciple, and disciple is just a follower. And so I try to model every day who I am and what I am. The way I talk, the way I dress, the things I do. I want students to see that, and it goes back to the Roland Barthes quote about the nature of the relationships of the adults. I take it as a great compliment if students say, I'd like to be like that teacher, I'd like to be like that person. I worry for them if they want to be like me, because I got whatever. But I want them to be future leaders is what I want, and I want them to be the leaders of the young students. We always talk about that. So build leadership. I will tell you that when you get into a district, or if you're there right now, you ought to know the district policy on discipline, whether that policy is in the board policy, which you can get off of almost any website, whether it's in your student handbook, whether it's in your teacher handbook. You need to know, what does it say about you as a teacher? What should you be doing as a teacher? What does it say about me as a principal? What are my guidelines? And what I know about district policy is it follows the law. And the two lessons that I have from school law, both times I took it, 3 times actually, I passed it every time. It's just different classes. But don't break the law and don't violate kids' civil rights. And so I know what the policy says, and I know what the procedures are, and I follow them. Every one of your schools has some kind of a behavior management, whether it's in ProStar or GoEduStar, I guess up there now in some schools, PowerSchool, School Vista, I don't know what else is out there, but every one of them has a school management component. Here it's PowerSchool. Teachers go onto it, they create a log entry, I get an email that they've dealt with something. Sometimes they want my help, sometimes not. Sometimes I go in and say, I reviewed it and it's fine. Teacher handled it. Other times I pull the student in. I deal with it, I handle it. Or I call parents, or whatever it has to happen. Or sometimes it's suspension. Just whatever. I would say the best thing you can do as a teacher is create a disciplined lesson plan and teach it. And you know, like every good lesson, you're going to have to teach it over and over again. In coaching, as a wrestling coach, I taught the same moves every year to the same kids every year, multiple times. And we reviewed it and we went back. If you have the right disciplined lesson plan, it's not something you do once and then walk away from. You will do it over and over and over. You will get what you ask for. I'm convinced. So create a disciplined lesson plan. What do you expect out of your classroom from the moment they walk in to the moment students walk out? I get really frustrated with students, where with, well, I get frustrated with students, but I also get frustrated with staff when kids aren't where they're supposed to be, and all of a sudden, you know, they look around and a student's not in their classroom. And I find the student, and they go, well, I told her I was leaving. Excuse me? How about, did you ask? Well, I just told her I was going to the bathroom. No, that's not respectful. What's a more respectful way? Can I please, you know, or I'm going to the bathroom, please? No. How about, oh, can I please go to the bathroom? And then waiting for the response of, yes. You know, amazing that there are teachers that just kind of tolerate kids telling them what they're going to do. No. How about asking? Part of respect. I will tell you, and this is where I'll disagree with some people, I think it's better to be fair than to be consistent. I think every situation is different. Either Emerson or Thoreau, and one of you maybe knows if you're an English major, One of those two guys, who are smarter than I am, said, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds." I remember that from high school. It's not written on my card here. Okay. What that says to me is, don't be consistent just to be consistent. That's crazy. You can adapt and change. Don't be consistent to a fault. I don't have a schema. I don't have a rubric that says if you do this, this happens. I don't. Every situation is different. Students are okay with being disciplined differently as long as they think it's fair. And you know, at the end of almost every conversation that I have with students about discipline, I say, "Do you think that's fair?" Now, most of the time they'll go, "Yeah," they agree. If that happens, I'm not going to have a bunch of if parents call. I go, "You know, we talked about it and your child said it's fair." The parents might not think it's consistent. The parents might not think it's fair, but the student does. And I'm okay with that. If the student and I come to an agreement, we're good. It'll be all right. Know your principal. And I would say this is really tough for my staff because I think I'm fair, and I think they know I'm consistently fair. I think some of them would like me to have the rubric and know that if something happened, this is exactly what's going to happen to the student. I don't think they operate that way in the classroom. I really don't. I freaked teachers out my first year here when I put in the teacher handbook, a teacher is responsible for the discipline in the room. I think they thought I'm never going to handle a discipline problem. They learned what I meant by that, and that is, you're the first line. You set up the discipline. When it doesn't work, then I'll back you as long as it's fair. And I'll back you as long as you stay reasonable. And I'll back you as long as you don't escalate a situation. Please don't escalate. Don't blow it up to more than it is. Don't get into an argument with students. If you ask them to do something and they won't do it, and you ask a couple times and you go away and you still come back or whatever it is, then I'll get involved. Don't get me wrong. And I have. And I support teachers. Sometimes I support teachers to a fault. And it's hard for me to do that, but I'll do it. So just kind of, just understand, you have a responsibility as a teacher first. But know your principal. Know what they will do and what they won't back. Ask them when you're there. And just remember, I tell teachers, when you gave me your problem, you also gave away any chance to say, "Oh, but you shouldn't have done it that way." Then don't give it to me. You give me your problem, I'm going to handle it. It's now become my problem. I'll let you know what I did, but don't second guess me. If you're going to second guess what happened, then don't send it to me. I think that's fair. Make parent contacts. Wouldn't you rather have your mechanic tell you, your car's got 85,000 miles on it, recommended that you do a timing change on it, starting to make a little noise. It'll cost you $600 now. Or you can try to stretch it out. You can try not to change it. But if it goes, you have a conflict, what do they call that? Conflict engine or something like that. My son knows. And if it goes, you're $5,000. Now, wouldn't you rather know that and make your decision? Wouldn't you rather do you think parents should rather know and hear from you than hear from me as a principal or hear from their child? Make parent contacts. Talk to them. Talk to them about the grades, behavior, attitudes. Talk to them when you see warning signs. Could you just help me? Let them be your partners. That's important. And just remember, in everything we do, what we're really trying to teach is persistence and that self-discipline that we came up with. I don't know what the numbers are now, but I still think it's probably pretty accurate that about half of UNL students drop out after their freshman year. Half of them don't make it back. Why? Is it because they couldn't handle it academically? I'm not so sure. Couldn't they handle it socially? Yeah, probably. I think they drop into things like some of us did when we went there too. I think the biggest thing is maybe they don't have the self-discipline or the persistence to fight through. Certainly, they graduated from a quality school. They graduated from your school. They graduated with an ACT or had an ACT that was high enough to get them there, and they had the money. There's something else involved. It's the self-discipline. And so I think it comes down to discipline yourself so somebody else doesn't have to. But then remember, I really get into, it's about creating followers, creating disciples, and I don't mean anything by that, outside of what it is, but that's where it comes from. Create leaders. Create the next group of good followers who then become leaders. And I think you can do that through some of the things that are there. I'm going to give Rhonda some of the resources. I'll put together some of the quotes that I had. I'll give you some of the other things and resources that I have, your contact information. Don't hesitate to contact me if you want to email or whatever. Talk to principals. That's one of the best ways that I learned some styles of what I did. And then my style of discipline is a mix. It's a mix of Boys Town. It's a mix of APL learning, which I think is the best thing out there right now. It goes back to TESA, the teacher expectations and student achievement. It goes back to the old I-TIPS, which is the instructional theory into practice, old Madeline Hunter, that nobody does Madeline Hunter anyway, but I do because I'm old school. I wasn't going to be a principal, you guys. I didn't think I could be. I am not a strict disciplinarian. I'm not authoritarian. I am who I am. I'm a teacher. And I thought, can a teacher really be a principal? Well, yeah, I think so. I've done it for 14 years, and they still keep giving me a school to come back to. What happened was I saw other people that I could model myself after. Other people who could do it the same way that, or close to the same way I did. Everybody does it different. Everybody does. I believe it works if you have a philosophy. I believe it works if you are consistent with yourself. I believe it works if you're true to who you are and you don't put on airs and you don't try to do it. If it's natural, it works. I think the same thing for teaching. I had pretty good success being a teacher and a coach. I kept getting hired back every year, and I got good evaluations, and I had some success both in the classroom and in the athletic field. It's because I was who I was. I didn't try to make myself into something I wasn't. You can be a love and logic guy. You can be an assertive discipline person. Some people call it abusive discipline. You can be who you want to be. You can be a Jim Fay person. You can be whoever. But be natural. Be yourself. Come up with a consistent philosophy is what I'll come down to. Same thing that I live on with being a principal. I have a philosophy of how I believe a school should be run, and it works. My philosophy is close to our elementary principal, close to our alternative principal, but we're all in different situations, and so it's modified differently. It works. Be yourself, find a philosophy, make it work, be consistent, be fair, more than consistent, be honest, be upfront. Work to create leaders. Those are the ideas I have for you, and I've rambled on long enough. So thank you. Good luck. If there's any way that I can help you, you'll have my contact information and some other resource things. Good luck in everything you do, and education is the best job you'll ever have. Thanks. Appreciate it. Rhonda, good luck to you. Thank you for letting me take a few minutes of your class.